Alright, so we got the short block back over here, and now it's time to finish taking this apart. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to take off the crankcase cover, which is the side of the engine block here. So in order to do that, I'm going to make sure that I set my engine down on the flywheel side, and I want to make sure that the governor lever here goes into the hole and it doesn't get bent from getting pushed on. So I'm going to let it sit like this. This is free to rotate and move inside the hole and it's not getting bent. And now I can see the PTO end of my crankshaft. The PTO, remember, is for power takeoff. This is where like the pulley for the belt on a snowblower would be attached. And we can see it's held on by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts on this particular engine. These are 8mm heads on this bolt. So I'll switch out to the 8. And just like with the cylinder head, I am going to go through and crack them loose in a crisscross pattern. And then spin them all out. They're in there fairly tight, so if you need a longer ratchet handle or to switch the 8 to the T side of your T handle to crack them loose and then switch it back for spinning, that's totally cool. I like to put these ones in the cardboard because otherwise they just simply get in the way for future operations. We'll set those down off the side. Spit them out. Once they're cracked loose, the order in which you spit them out isn't usually all that important. Alright, so once they're out, I should be able to lift up on this crankcase cover and have it slide off. Sometimes, if it's a used engine and there's rust on the shaft, we need to sand that off first. This one seems to be okay yet because it's a pretty new engine. Also, sometimes the gasket that seals between the two can be kind of stuck and act like a glue. So there's like a thick lug or corner right here. We could use a prying device to pry up on here if we need to. But usually, a little bit of pulling and wiggling, and these ones come off. So I'm going to pull and wiggle, and it's going to slide right up for me. Okay? And so here's the inside of my crankcase cover. You can see my gasket, and you can see this also has a couple of dowels that help align the cover and keep the gasket in place for assembly. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and set this off to the side. I'm going to set it face up, because I'm going to use it to hold my camshaft in a little bit here. Alright, now that we have the engine opened up, you can see a little bit of oil remaining in there. Okay, and fortunately I didn't tip it this way and have it run out. Well, I just did now, but it can run out there. So in case you're seeing this, you do want to be careful of how you hold your engine, because it'll come out and make a mess like this. Usually, if you got a blue rag on hand, it's no big deal. Okay, we take a blue rag, we wipe it up. That's kind of the nature of working on engines, especially the dismantling. There's a little bit of oil around, but 1 or 2 rags, and it usually comes out. If that concerns you, we can dump that out into a drain pan right away, or sometimes what I'll do is I'll just take a rag, I'll fold it up or wad it up, and I'll just tuck it in there. And it'll just slowly wick up the oil over time while I do other things to it. Okay, and then I can pull that out, put that in a flammable materials disposal container. Alright, before trying to remove the camshaft, I want to identify and line up the timing marks in the engine. This is my cam gear, this is my crank gear right here. See the red slash, see the red? And then the dots. I'm going to rotate my crankshaft so that the dot in the gear and the dot in the camshaft are directly across from each other. Those are my timing marks, and I want them to be lined up. That not only verifies that my engine was correctly timed in the first place, as well as usually makes camshaft removal a lot easier. Also, for this engine and many engines, you want the engine laying on its side so that when you remove the camshaft, the lifters don't just fall out because of gravity. The lifters, like your push rods, they have their wear surfaces from their specific locations, and we want to keep track of that. And if they fall out, it's awfully hard to determine which one was intake versus exhaust, since they are identical except for where they came from. Okay, so my camshaft just lifts right out like that. You can see on the back side of the gear is my compression release mechanism. Okay. This dumps off a little bit of compression when you're pulling the engine over at low speeds to make it easier to pull start. We've got your exhaust lobe right here, which operates the exhaust valve. Your intake lobe is right here, which operates your intake lobe, or intake valve. And then you've got your cam bearings that support the camshaft. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put this into my crankcase cover like that. I put the bearing into its bearing hole just to hold it, so I can come back, wipe it down, and wrap it up in a blue towel to keep it safe. The camshaft out of the way, you can see the tappets or the lifters right here. The PTO side of the engine here is where the muffler was on the cylinder head, so that makes this the exhaust lifter. So I want to pull that out. So it's got a wide flat that rides on the cam lobe, and then a little cup that the push rod would sit in. I'm going to label that one exhaust, and I'll either tape it down or poke it through the cardboard. And then that means that this lower one here is my intake. And you can see it's exactly the same to the naked eye as the exhaust. There's no telling it apart. Maybe underneath a microscope when examining the surfaces, but we're not doing that. We don't have a microscope. So we need to label them as they come out. At that point, you're going to get your instructor checkpoint for step 35. I'll flip it over to the last page. And now we need to go ahead and remove the piston and crankshaft, or piston and connecting rod combination. In order to do that, we need to rotate the crankshaft so that we can see at least one of the connecting rod bolts. These are a little bit tricky to get to. You either need a wrench, a box end wrench, or a 1/4 inch drive ratchet and extension. The T-handle, just too big to get in there. I like to use the 10mm box end wrench. I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to just crack it loose, usually 1 or 2 turns. Okay. When it's pretty loose, I'm going to rotate this down so that the other one's exposed. I'm going to loosen this one. Do be careful of these machined aluminum edges and various other edges within the engine crankcase. They can sometimes be sharp, and you can get cut or scraped on them pretty well if you're not careful. So do be careful of that. But once I've got them broken free with the wrench, this is the tedious part. You just kind of have to come in here and loosen them by hand with your 2 fingers. There's no real easy or good way to get in here. They're all full of oil and they're slippery. So you just got to slowly back them out. 1. I'm going to rotate this around. There's 2. Okay. Don't put them in your cardboard, because we're gonna park them back in the connecting rod later. Next, we pull off our connecting rod cap. This is our connecting rod cap. It's got a oil dipper built right into it. One thing to note is this little line right here at the tip of my finger. That's called your match mark. When we put this back on a connecting rod, we need to make sure that the other half lines up, and I'll show you that in just a moment. I'm going to set that off to the side. And now what I want to do is I can rotate my crankshaft a little bit out of the way so that I can push on the bottom of the connecting rod. I'm going to have my hand here to catch it because the piston's got to come out the top. So I'm going to push on it. It takes a bit of a stiff push. But we don't want the piston launching and hitting the workbench or the floor because it'll get damaged. So we got to be careful about how we do this. Okay, we'll push that up so the piston pops out. You can see it's come out. Now my piston is out of my engine here. This is very soft aluminum. It gets damaged pretty easy, so we want to be careful about how we handle these. Don't scrape it, bash it, drop it, or smash it if we don't need to. And if you take a look here, here's the other half of that match mark, so that when my connecting rod is on properly, those two halves line up and make a whole line there. And so this is our bearing surface in here. It's also aluminum and it's very soft and sensitive. So we're going to put this back on and we're going to take our bolts and we're going to park them in there, and that will make it less likely something can accidentally scratch or gouge that bearing surface, as well as keep our cap and connecting rod together. It's very important that as you are working around or near your classmates that you don't accidentally swap caps, because this cap was machined with this half of the connecting rod, and if you switch these caps, they look identical, but they are not. They're all slightly different, and if you swap caps, you'll have a crankshaft that won't want to rotate very easily, and that'll make your engine assembly process more difficult than it should be. And also, it would be improper engine assembly because you wouldn't have the right bearing clearances anymore. So usually what I like to do with these is take a blue rag, wrap these up in a blue rag, and then put them safely in the back of your locker to help kind of protect them. And we'll get them back out as we get into our inspection phase and we do some measurements. But they can safely sit in the back of your locker for the time being. Step 37, pretty easy step, is remove the crankshaft. If we've got everything out and out of the way and we took out the flywheel key like we should have earlier, all we have to do is lift this straight up and out comes our crankshaft here. Okay, here you can see the PTO end, the flywheel end, our offset crank pin. The crank pin is where the connecting rod bolts around. We can see the cam gear and we can see the governor gear. Okay. We're going to wipe this down. We'll put this in our locker for safekeeping too. This is usually made out of a cast iron or steel, and so these are typically a little bit more durable, but they do have bearing journals, which is a polished surface for bearings, and we do want to protect those from scratches and dings and nicks. At this point, we're going to go ahead and wipe out any excess oil that still remains in our crankcase. We'll wipe everything down. There's a short list of some components to have out, and we'll go through, we'll give it a final inspection. I'll sign off on it. This will get turned into the inbox for grading and entering. You get your grade for your lab project by completing this and turning it in. So you're going to want to make sure that you get your checkpoints checked when you get to them, and then once you're actually done and after the last checkpoint, you turn it into the inbox with your name on it. Any questions? Come find me and ask, or rewind the video and watch it again more closely to maybe see what you missed. And guess we'll see you in the lab. Thanks for watching.